Good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't met me, I'm David Sequeira. I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Maya Gallery. I'm also the person that puts the Art Forum program together. And it really is my pleasure to welcome you in Zoomland and in Federation Hall. And before I introduce our guest speaker, I invite you to join me in grounding yourself in the deep knowledge that for many, many generations, before the VCA or the University of Melbourne was even considered, that the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation practiced the arts here. They practiced song and dance, shared stories, made paintings and sculptures, practiced healing, and those rituals and traditions continue today. And please join me with joy and honour in acknowledging their elders past, present and emerging. So our guest speaker, it's his second day in Melbourne. How exciting. Basim Magdy. Basim Magdy, born in Egypt, lives and works in Basel, Switzerland, and he's an artist and a filmmaker. His films, paintings and photographic works are layered with poetic gestures and unusual observations that allude to absurdity as a daily occurrence. His work colourfully mixes fiction with historical references and collective delusion embedded with humour, all of which seem to be trapped inside a confused sense of time, somewhere where past, present and future constantly switch places. The list of his exhibitions goes forever. They're all over the world. These are the ones I've selected. His work's been shown at Frac, Bretagne in Rennes, the Museum of Contemporary Art, The Hague, Fundación Antoni Tàpies in Barcelona, Röda, Sten, Konsthall, Gothenburg, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Antwerp, MAAT Museum, Lisbon, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago. And his work's also been included in La Biennale de Montreal, Media City Seoul Biennial, the 13th Istanbul Biennial, Sharjah Biennial, Athens Biennial, and many, many others. He is a guest in Melbourne of West Space, where his work is part of an exhibition called Stranger Than Fiction. And a big shout out to the West Space crew, who are very dear friends of the VCA. And just to let people know, the exhibition closes on the 31st of August, and this coming Saturday is a symposium co-curated by Joanna Kitto and Helen Grogan. And yes, clap for that, yes. And people can find details about that symposium on the West Space website. But really, wherever you are, Zoomland or Federation Hall, please join me in making Basim very, very welcome to the podium. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank David and Lisa and everybody who brought me here. Also, obviously, Joanna and West Space. I have half an hour to talk about a lot of work. So I decided to choose a selection of many different things that I've done because I think for me it's important to talk about the joy of working in different mediums and how that is a great response for me to my curiosity. And in general, it's just something that allows me to communicate and discuss a lot of my ideas. I'll start with works on paper, which is something I've been doing since the early 2000s. I finished art school in 2000 in Cairo. And after that, I studied painting. And after that, I did a lot of painting. And eventually I felt the need to not become just a painter. So I started doing other things. I made an animation. I worked with installation. And at some point I arrived at Super 8 film, but we'll get to that later. While I was doing all of these things, I was always making works on paper, and I call them works on paper because they're basically paintings. There are collaged elements. There is spray paint, gouache, oil, acrylic, sometimes watercolors, and colored pencil, all in the same work. Um, the idea was always to capture maybe small ideas that are layered. And I think when the David's introduction talked about my work very eloquently, was something about the idea of bringing together unusual observations or looking at reality in a way that we understand it and try to find a way to understand it differently. So I'll just go through these and talk a little bit. This one's called the last day of written history. And it was maybe the beginning of my interest in the passing of time and how the relationship between the past, present, and the future are hope reflected jewels in the sky. When I talk about the passing of time, I like to use this analogy of, and I think this applies more to my films. I like to imagine bringing the future and the present and the past into a locked room with two chairs and have them play musical chairs and see what happens. So they're constantly switching places. There are references to the past projected onto the future and the present. This one's called Luck Takes an Unidentifiable Form at Sunrise. They shot a movie with frozen butterflies and cautious optimism. The titles have always been very important for me. I see them as a layer of the work, maybe also a way to create a different understanding of the image. So you look at an image without seeing the title, like imagine that this is something you're seeing in a show and you're looking at this work and you understand it a certain way, and then you walk to the label and you read the title, and then hopefully you see the work in a different way after you read the title. Every decade, memory poses as a container heavier than its carrier. And then, as I mentioned, at some point, I think it was 2009, I came across Super 8 camera, and I didn't grow up with Super 8 cameras. I didn't grow up with film. I became very curious about it. I tried to learn as much as possible about what working with film means or meant. I started shooting footage, and I made a film called Turtles All the Way Down in 2009. For that, I had to write a script, and it was my first time to write a script. I was happy with the film, but I felt like I could find other ways to write a script. So I made a film about the way things are, and I decided to write it differently. And I started writing, and what came out was something that was, I think, poetic. And it also made me realize that my attempt to write poetry in my teens until I was maybe 22, which ended up being horrible poetry, failed because I wanted to capture ideas and I wasn't really interested in language. But what happened when I made the film was that the juxtaposition of the poetic writing with the image and the sound created something that to me was the kind of poetry that I wanted to make. I realized that the poetry I wanted to make all along involved image and sound and words and a way to bring ideas together, ideas that maybe in a logical world don't make a lot of sense, or we don't think of them as making a lot of sense. But when you put them together in a film, they start making sense in a different way. I decided, because I don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to be able to show films. I will only show a part of a film in the end. But I decided that to do I decided to do this differently. So I'm going to show stills from the film, and while I'm showing the stills, I will be reading the script of the film, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. I've never done this before. So the film is called A Film About the Way Things Are. I looked at the endless mass of water on the horizon with regret. What if things were different? Maybe I can become someone else for some time. For years, my dreams had become tangled in a parade of gestures and sign language. Scenes from an old documentary about flies flashed in front of my eyes. Somehow it always reminded me that eternity was a one-way track. Memories of places, buildings, and spectacles danced and leapt from one cloud to the other. The dead bird I hung from my neck fell in the water, and my many masks aligned themselves in architectural forms of foreign proportions. Their blank eyes, full of sympathy, told tales of locked rooms and primitive mousetraps. Their windows of reflective glass projected images of historical monuments, standing on top of layer upon layer of painted shame. They said, "Your masquerade is invisible to the whole world, but to yourself. Even your pets see your flaws." My pets? What pets? I've always managed to keep a journal of the future, with worn out pages smudged with numbers. Predicting what I will say to the world years from now burdened me like diamond ring guilt. Every second was a failed attempt at understanding the complex geometry of time. If only the future was a sharp reflection of the past. My father kept a ruler in his pocket for as long as I can remember. He said he needed it to measure the passing of time and the fading away of faces and memories. Eventually, the numbers on his ruler wore out. Time started looking like a stranger wearing his father's face as a mask. Suddenly, I had an epiphany. I started seeing the vapor rising from the surface of the water. The evening stars turned brown and swallowed the night sky in their humbleness. It was like a dream I knew. It was like a dream I understood too well. The eerie calm before the storm. Um, and then I made 13 Essential Rules for Understanding the World, which I think some of you have seen it either now in the show at West Space, or if you're slightly older, 10 years ago in Art as a Verb, which was here in Melbourne. 13 Essential Rules for Understanding the World was a very different film. I used a completely different strategy. I didn't think too much about it. It was three very simple components, a list that I was working on for a very long time in an attempt to understand the world and why the world doesn't make sense. And it kept feeling defeatist and bleak. And I didn't know what to do with it because it was just too harsh. And eventually I started drawing faces on the petals of tulips, and I filmed them. And then I saw the footage next to the list and it made sense. So I decided to make a film in 3 days. And it was the shortest film I ever made in terms of process. But also I put it on my website like I do with all my films. All my films are on my website. You can watch them from beginning to end. And someone found them and took screenshots of them and put them on Tumblr, and they started getting reblogged and became very popular among a younger generation at this point. And it wasn't exhibited for 2 years. No one wanted to show it, and eventually after 2 years it was exhibited. But by then it was quite well known in a completely different world, which is something I found very interesting. When I started working with Super 8 film, I became interested in film as a material. I became interested in its tangibility, the fact that I can hold it with my hands, the fact that I can somehow influence how an image is captured on something that I can alter with my own hands. I can punch holes in it. I can dip it in other in solutions that would change the color. So I started reading a lot about film, about the chemistry of film, about how to treat it differently, how to explore its unexplored potential. There is, of course, a long history of people experimenting with film as a material, and I wanted to build on top of that. One of the things I read was people dipping film in different kinds of solutions, and the results would change the color, the quality of the image. So I started experimenting with dipping my rolls of film in different household acidic solutions. And I started getting interesting results, and I started tweaking them. And eventually I got to the point where I was happy with what I was doing, and the only thing left was to find a conceptual reason to do that and not just experiment for the sake of experimenting and do something that seems fun, it's great, but I just needed to add more to it. So there was a big demolition site close to where I live. So I started going there every day and taking photographs on different kinds of film, different rolls of film, so different brands, different sensitivities. And as I did this for a month, that demolition site gradually evolved into a construction site. So they finished demolishing the building and they started constructing the new building. And I really like this idea, the switch from demolition to construction. And I realized that it's actually very difficult to tell from the photographs what is demolition and what is construction. I pickled the rolls of film, which is the term that I like to use for the process, because it's kind of like pickling cucumbers. You dip the film in I mean, it's obviously a more complicated process, but you dip the film in acid for a calculated period of time, and then you cross-process the film afterwards, and it works. So I pickled the rolls of film, and I decided that I wanted to show them as a slide presentation. So I got 2 slide projectors, and I kept experimenting with how the images should work together. And eventually I came up with this kind of CinemaScope format, which is 2 slides projected and overlapping in the middle. So from 2 projectors, like you can see here, and they overlap in the middle. So the color in the middle is always a combination of the colors of the 2 slides. The slides have different dominant colors because they're shot on different film, and different kinds of film respond to being exposed to acid differently and produce different colors. I'll go back to the title of the piece. The piece is called "A 240-second Analysis of Failure and Hopefulness with Coke Vinegar and Other Tear Gas Remedies." For me, this was kind of a very similar seeing the demolition turn into construction, and not being able to tell where that ends and where that begins, and the the lines between them were extremely blurred, made me think a lot about collective failure and collective hopefulness, that they're both misleading. At the bottom of failure, there is a lot of hope, and at the peak of hopefulness, there is a bigger possibility of failure. The reference to Coke vinegar and other tear gas remedies is actually the household chemicals that I dipped the film in. All the rolls of film in this piece were dipped either in Coca-Cola or vinegar or other chemicals that I know have been used in demonstrations as remedies, household remedies for tear gas. There are 80 slide combinations, and I'll show some of them. And then I wanted to find a way to, because the last piece I showed was time-based. It's a sequence of fleeting moments that pass like a film. And the only way to experience that moment again is you have to wait till the end of the film, or in the case of the previous work, the slide presentation, and wait for it to come again, and to experience it again. I wanted to do two new things with this work. I wanted to have a piece that is laid out on the wall instead of being time-based, where you can create your own connections between the narrative and the images. But at the same time, I wanted to print what I was seeing what I was holding in my hands with the film, the pickled film and the colors of the pickled film. This way of altering a representation of reality, the idea of taking photographs is to freeze a moment to capture a moment and freeze it the way it looks. And basically what I'm doing now is I'm taking that and turning it into something that distances it from reality, from the way it looks, changing the color, changing the quality, adding intentional light leaks. This is the biggest in size. This is the biggest piece I ever made. It's called An Apology to a Love Story That Crashed into a Whale. It's an imaginary love story that is created in fragments. Fragments, the images are fragments of situations or moments, but also the text pieces. There are 64 photographs, which include 17 pieces that are text pieces. As you can see here, the blue is caused by the film pickling. The orange at the bottom is an intentional light leak. The text is sometimes questions like this. Sometimes it's telling of stories, dreams. I didn't want it to be chronological, so it kind of has a beginning and an end, but they're mixed up on the wall. It's very important for me, for all my work, to write the script or the text that I use myself. It's one of the most important layers of the work for me, and it's something that I enjoy doing. This is another work. I was asked to create a billboard. And so I made this piece. It's called Love Poem for City Dreamers. It was shown, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks on this billboard, which was overlooking Myland Park in London. You can read the text here. It's a photograph that I shot of the skyline of New York from a skyscraper on 6th Avenue. And this is part of a poem that also became part of a film. I used it in the script of a film called Fear, Death, Love, Death, which is in the show at West Space. And then I made New Acid in 2020. Can't remember. New Acid is a film about animals in a zoo that have a WhatsApp group chat together, chat group, and they have different characters. They they talk to each other, they question reality, they question life, they question if some of them are bots or not. Eventually, the ring-tailed lemurs emerge as the villains. They question love. The giraffes can see everything from above, so they know what's happening. The film ends with so while the animals are texting each other and having their own feuds and fights and little identity crises, the ugly faces with their cheesy sunglasses, or the humans, arrive at the zoo, and the villains, the ring-tailed lemurs, somehow manage to convince them they're domesticated and cute, and they find a way to have them take them with them, and that's how they escape the zoo, which causes a lot of issues for the other animals. It's a big controversy among the animal community. And then that's how the film ends. One of the things I like to do is to create works out of other works. So I find a moment in a film that I made, and I feel like it has a lot more potential that hasn't been explored in the film. And I make another film, another work in another medium that kind of expands on this idea. During the pandemic, which is this thing that nobody likes to talk about anymore, I started, well, everything stopped. Travel stopped, emails stopped. And I realized it was the best time to actually do something I've been wanting to do for over a decade, which is paint, make large oil paintings. So I started doing that, and the first painting I made is this one. It's called A Desperate Epiphany Led Us to the Elusive Phantom of Tangled Truths. And it basically, the starting point for the painting was the end of the film. So basically, this is what happens next. These are the humans with the lemurs arriving at a dead end where there are glitching screens. Hopefully, looking for the tangled truth, but, well, it's glitching. The paintings are kind of a playground for me. They're with film, I can create very complex layers of different ways to understand reality, different ways to propose different understandings for reality, creating fiction, talking about feelings, about thought, about philosophy, maybe about collective failure, hopefulness. And I really enjoy working with the different layers, the sound, the image, the text, and within all three of these, there are other layers. But it is time-based, and it's like I said, it's a sequence of fleeting moments that don't come back. With photography, I could lay it all out on a wall, and that allows me more flexibility with capturing moments and keeping them for people to think about them maybe for longer periods of time and to create connections between the images and the text. But the thing about with both photography and filmmaking is that there has to be something in reality in front of the camera. I don't make animations anymore, so that's like not an option right now. In both cases, there has to be something in front of the camera. But with painting, I could create a world from scratch. I could paint things that don't exist in reality. So I started painting, and I think what happened is that the paintings I made, of course, came out completely differently from the last time I had painted, which was maybe 15 or 16 years before that. I'm much older, hopefully more mature. My thinking about the world and my understanding of how everything in life is tangled together is different. So yeah, I started making these paintings. I don't really think too much about them. I just start with elements that don't usually relate to each other in real life, and I try to find a way to make sense of them. This one's called Young Lumumba and his pet Kukul, staring his 35th birthday in the eye. Lumumba was killed when he was 35. An intergalactic messenger teleported us to a cave settlement ruled by shared compassion and humility. This painting started with me seeing images of the space shuttle on top of the Boeing aircraft, which is something that they actually do to move space shuttles from the East Coast to the West Coast and back and forth, because space shuttles can land, but they can't actually take off from an airport. So to take them from one side of the US to the other, that's how they actually transport them. This is called A Festive Gathering of Near Extinct Animals and Dead Revolutionaries. The space discotheque is an underground liberation army. I think this is the last one. The dictator and his cockroach count their blessings. How are we doing on time? I didn't keep track. How much time do we have left? Okay. So I was going to show you a part of one of my films. I think what I'm going to do is I will maybe just show you a couple of minutes of it, and then we can take questions. This is a film called The Dent. I made it in 2014. It's about a small town that the inhabitants of the small town wake up one morning and decide they want to host the Olympic to get some sort of international recognition. The only problem is they party all night, and the next day the representative of the Olympic Committee come and they're not ready. So their mayor decides to hypnotize them with forgetfulness, and he starts playing different stunts to distract them from their reality. And eventually they decide to accept who they are. Okay. All my films are on my website. It's basimmagdy.com. You can watch them from beginning to end. So I'm sorry that I'm not going to show you the whole thing. And I just wanted to say thank you for staying. And and if you're interested, on Saturday I will be in conversation with Joanna and Lisa at the West Space Symposium, the Stranger Than Fiction Symposium. And if you go to the West Space website, you will find all the information. Thank you all. I'm ready for questions.
Thanks so much, Basim. We do have time for a couple of questions. Is there anybody that's got a question? Yeah, please, Tessa.
I've never done any drugs. I I always felt like I don't need them. Um, when I was a kid, I really liked Miro's work. I was really interested in color, and luckily, I mean, art school didn't completely destroy that, so that was great. Um, or maybe actually, I kept it as a reaction to art school, as a defense mechanism. I'm speaking at an art school, so I shouldn't be saying this. Um, but I think it's just I have a lot of different interests, and they kind of come in and out of the work all the time. I've always been interested. When I was young, I was really obsessed with all kinds of insects. I went through a bird watching phase 10 years ago. I'm really interested in the world around me, and not just I don't want to just tell. So the last film, this The Dent, has two parallel stories. The one that I told about the inhabitants of the small town, but also parallel to that is at some point the mayor, in his attempt to hypnotize him with forgetfulness, he brings the circus to town, and there's only one circus elephant left, and the circus owner has a psychedelic dream, and he wakes up and he decides to put his clowns and their wives to work, and he asks them to paint black and white stripes on the body of the elephant, turning the elephant into a zebra. And the elephant sees its own reflection in a water puddle, realizes that it has become something else, and eventually it somehow creates the dent on the facade of the arena, which is the title of the film. So, and also in my films, there are a lot of protagonists, but they're never mentioned by name, and they're always anonymous. I'm not interested in creating stories about specific people. I'm interested in creating stories that maybe as many people as possible could relate to, as maybe they're part of their own experiences. But I'm also interested in understanding the world in an unusual way. And I feel like our understanding of the world is most of the time very human centric. It's our point of view, which makes sense. But um, this is why I made a film with tulips explaining the world to us as the protagonists, or animals looking at their own lives and maybe looking at humans and how they see humans. I mean, another film called I'm blanking. Um, I remember, but I mean another film with the ocean as the protagonist, and completely different logic. I'm always trying to look at seeing things using different logics. So, trying to imagine how the world around me sees things, and how it sees us is also part of it.
There was another question. Yeah, please.
It depends. Every film is a different process. I would generally say that most of the time I film because I travel with my 16 millimeter camera, which is a very big, heavy camera. And I film wherever. So In 2013, I stopped making the works on paper that I showed in the beginning, and my excuse was I was traveling too much and I wasn't spending enough time in the studio, and painting needs consistency. So my way to kind of remedy this situation was I started working more with photography and filmmaking, because that's something I could do while I was traveling. So most of the time I film things that I know I could use because I understand my own way of working now. I understand my own interests. I also like to surprise myself. I like to film things that I don't know how I'm going to use in a film, and then I have to force myself to figure it out, to find a way to get them into the film. So most of the time it starts this way. It starts with filming, and then I start writing. Most of the time also on a plane while traveling, and then I have more writing than the footage, so I go back and I film in response to the writing, and I keep going back and forth. But sometimes it's different, 13 Essential Rules for Understanding the World it kind of happened very organically, very fast, in an unexpected way. Some of my earlier films don't have a script, like a narrative. There is no spoken or subtitles, spoken narrative or subtitles. For example, New Acid, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I didn't have a script. So I went to film all the animals in different zoos, and I created sort of personalities for them. Like, for example, the hippo was struggling with insecurities related to its body. The peacock is kind of a philosopher. The giraffes are the cynics. The lemurs are the villains. The meerkats are angry at the world. The ostrich is possibly a bot, or at least believed to be a bot, disguised as a feather duster. And I couldn't write a script. So basically, I was supposed to show it in an exhibition, and I had a week left, and there was no film and there was no script. So I just went to the studio, sat in front of the computer, and I started writing text messages on the footage right away. I didn't write a script. There was no script. I wrote the script after, I actually typed it on the computer after I finished the film. So every day I would go and just write text messages and respond to them, and keep doing this for a week, and I sent them the film on the morning of the opening. So yeah, it's just, I mean, all of this is not very important for me. What's important is I find a way to say what I want to say in a different way each time, but also it's all about curiosity. It's all about me being curious about something and trying to come up with a way to talk about it that actually makes me feel like I'm contributing something to myself more than, or before contributing something to anyone or anyone else. Yeah, you're welcome.
We're going to leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, people in Zoom land and people in Federation Hall. But please really join me in thanking and acknowledging Basim's generosity and just warmth and capacity to share so many ideas and so many practices. And I'm really looking forward to. I haven't seen the show at West Space, so I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But please join me in thanking Basim one more time.
Thank you. Thank you all.